Hi, third grade scholars. This is Mrs. Moore here. Today, I get to teach you our third area and perimeter lesson. Please have out a piece of paper, a pencil, and your third grade math packet, if you have one, right next to you so that you can find the perimeter of shapes along with me today and participate in this lesson. Boys and girls, by the end of this lesson, you will be able to determine the perimeter of any polygon. So students, during our last lesson, you learned all about the perimeter of shapes and how to determine the perimeter of a rectangle. I would like for you to pause the video and write down what you remember. Well, what is perimeter? And based on our lesson yesterday, how do you determine the perimeter of a rectangle? Pause the video. Wonderful job, third graders. You are exactly right. The perimeter is the total distance around the shape. And we find the perimeter of any shape by very carefully adding up all of the side lengths. And we know that all of the side lengths added together represents the total distance around the outside of a shape. Last lesson, you got really good at determining the perimeters of rectangles. So pause the video, draw this rectangle on your page, and determine the perimeter, or the distance around this rectangle. Fantastic! I hope that you remembered that you can easily determine the missing side lengths because rectangles are parallelograms and their opposite parallel sides are equal. So we know that this side would be 4 and this parallel side would be 2, which is critical because you need all 4 side lengths to determine the total perimeter. So for your equation, I hope that you added 4 plus 2 plus 4 plus 2 to determine the total distance around the shape. Excellent. Were you able to determine that the perimeter, the total distance around the shape, was 12 feet by carefully adding the side lengths? Give yourselves a pat on the back. Yes, perimeter is the total distance around a shape. Fantastic. So boys and girls, I have one more task for you before we get started. I would like for you to think about when you would have to determine the perimeter of something in your real life. Jot down some ideas. When would you have to solve perimeter problems in your real life if perimeter means the total distance just around the edge or outside of a shape? Absolutely fantastic, yes. So if you were trying to put a fence around your garden or in your yard, you would need to know just the distance around the garden. If I wanted to put a border around my welcome wall or a wall in the hall, I would need to know the distance just around the wall because the perimeter only refers to the edge of a shape. You would also use perimeter for fencing, or if you were putting trim around a window or around the outside of a room or the outside of a door. What else did you think of? Great thinking. Words that tell you you're talking about perimeter are around, fencing. I know it goes on the outside of a yard. Border goes on the outside of a picture or a frame. Outside, yes, because it's the very edge of a shape. You know that you need to know the length and the width because you have to add all of the side lengths together to determine perimeter. And even edge, because edge just refers to the edge of something, like the edge of this page. Fantastic. So today, our learning is different because last time we only determined the perimeter of rectangles. But you can determine the perimeter of really any polygon. And so today, we're going to take what we know about perimeter, To determine the perimeters of any polygons by carefully adding all of the side lengths together to determine the total distance around each shape. So we have to use what we know about regular polygons to determine side lengths. So you guys know from our geometry unit that came right before our area and perimeter unit that a regular polygon refers to any shape with all sides having the same length. We also learned about rectangles, and we know for rectangles the opposite parallel sides are equal, and squares and rhombuses all have 4 sides with an equal length. So I know you're really good at this, but I just wanted to review. For this regular triangle, if this side length were 4 inches, what would the 2 remaining side lengths be and why? Precisely, they would also be 4 inches because all sides have the same length because it's a regular triangle. This is a regular octagon. So what would the side length be of all 8 sides? Yes, if this side length were 2 centimeters, all of the remaining side lengths would also be 2 centimeters because it's a regular octagon. So all sides have the same length. You know for rectangles, the opposite parallel sides are equal. Pause the video and determine what would these 2 side lengths be and why. Absolutely, this opposite parallel side would be 7 meters because I know opposite parallel sides have equal lengths. And if this side were 2 meters, its opposite parallel side would also be, say it out loud, 2 meters because opposite parallel sides are equal in rectangles. What would all of these side lengths be and why, 3rd graders? Wonderful, they would all be 6 millimeters because an attribute of squares is that all sides are equal length. And so I know that all of these sides have the same length of 6 millimeters. I have another thing that I would like for you to remember just briefly. What is the difference between area and perimeter? And how do we find the area of rectangles? And how do we find the perimeter of rectangles? Pause your video and jot down your notes. Yes, you guys know that area refers to the space covered in square units on the inside of a shape. Area is the total amount of space covered by a shape. Perimeter is different. Perimeter is just the total distance around the outside of the shape. So I have highlighted in area, we refer to the total space covered by a shape. So all of the space in yellow refers to the area. We know for perimeter, we carefully add the side lengths because the perimeter is just the total distance around the outside of a shape. I like to remember it as area is space covered and perimeter is distance around a shape. We know that you find area by multiplying length times width, and we find perimeter by carefully adding the side lengths. In our lesson tomorrow, we're going to determine areas and perimeters of different shapes. Okay, 3rd graders, let's get to some practicing together so that you're able to do the independent assignment on your own. We're going to determine the perimeters of any shape together. You might be noticing that this isn't a rectangle. You're exactly right. Boys and girls, would you please classify the shape by carefully counting the side lengths? You're exactly right. This shape is a hexagon because it has 6 sides. So for this particular shape, we know the sides aren't given to us. But that's okay because square units are provided. So I can determine the side lengths by counting the number of square units that each side length takes up. Let's do this one together. So this side length is 1, 2, 3 because it covers 3 square units. This side length is 1 because it covers 1 square unit perfectly. This side length is 1, 2 square units. This side length is also 2 square units. What's this side length? Yes, it's 1. And our final side length is? Yes, our final side length is 3 units. So, to determine the perimeter of this shape, I know I carefully add up each of the side lengths. And here is the perimeter represented down here because we know that we can think of perimeter as if I cut the corner of the shape and I stretched out all the sides to just be one line, like this line down here, what is the total distance of all of the side lengths put together? So to determine perimeter, I very, very carefully add each side length. I add them all together, and that tells me the total perimeter. So I'm going to write down my equation. And I know I need to have 6 addends because I have to add all 6 sides of this hexagon together. So I have 3 plus 1 plus 2 plus 2 plus 1 plus 3. I've gotten all of the side lengths in there together. To find the perimeter or the total distance around this shape, I have to very carefully add all of the side lengths together. So I would add 3 plus 1 plus 2 plus 1 plus 1 plus 3. But I found a way to make this more efficient. You guys know when you add multiple addends, you should combine the addends to either make a 10 or to make it as efficient as possible. So I just added 1 and 3 to equal 4, and then 2 and 2 to equal 4, and 1 and 3 to equal 4. So these represent the exact same side lengths, but this was just a little easier to add because I know 4 plus 4 plus 4 is 12 because it's the same as 4 times 3. So do be thinking of ways to make this as efficient as possible. Let's determine the perimeter of this shape. Pause the video and remind me, what is perimeter? Yes, perimeter is the total distance around a shape. And we determine perimeter by very carefully adding each side length. That tells you the total distance around. Fantastic. So let's begin by classifying this shape. Well, count the number of sides that this shape has and tell me what's the name of the shape. Exactly. This shape is a triangle. So it's a regular triangle, which means right away that all the sides have the same length. So I know if the length of this side is 4 feet, what would the lengths of the 2 remaining sides be? Fantastic. They would also be 4 feet. So to determine the perimeter of this triangle, what would I do? Would you please write the equation you would use to determine the perimeter of this triangle on your page? Pause the video. Wonderful, you're exactly right. You would add each of the side lengths, 4 feet plus 4 feet plus 4 feet. And that tells you the total distance around the edge of the shape. The perimeter is the total distance around the shape, just the outside. So I know the perimeter of the shape, the total distance around the entire shape is 12 feet. Miss Moore forgot to put her units in, so I'm going to add 12 feet. I'm going to put FT as my abbreviation for feet. Good. I know it's not square feet because it's not measuring the space covered. It's just the total distance around. Remember, I pretend I cut one of the corners and stretch out all the sides to be one side like represented below, and that's the perimeter of the shape. It's the total distance around the outside edges of the shape. Fantastic listening. Okay, let's do this one together. So as always, I'd like you to start just by classifying the shape. Pause the video and count the number of sides the shape has so that we can identify the name of this shape. What is the name of this shape? How many sides does it have? You're right, it is an octagon because it has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 sides. Determine the number of sides the shape has first, because you know that that's the number of addends that you have to have, because perimeter is found by carefully adding up all of the side lengths of a shape. Boys and girls, what is this side length? 1, 2, 3, 4 units. Let's check. Yes, what is this side length? Remember, a side is any line with two endpoints. So here's an endpoint and here's an endpoint. So what's this side length? 1, and this one is 1. What about this side length? You know, anywhere a side changes direction is another side length. What is it? You're right, it's also 1. What's this side length? 2. 1, 1, and what's our last side length? 1. Oh my goodness, you must see a lot of 1s here. So one way we could check our perimeter is by carefully counting each square unit around the shape. I also like to write my equation. Would you guys please very carefully write your equation? Oh my goodness, fantastic job. So you'll notice right away, this is a very, very long equation with lots of add-ins and lots of 1s. So can we think of some ways to combine these side lengths? Okay, so I have 4. So why don't you guys write this equation on your paper? And then would you please think of a more efficient way to add these numbers together and write another equation that includes all of the side lengths to the side. What is the perimeter of the shape? The way that Mrs. Moore made this more efficient is I added 4 plus, I added the 1s together, so plus 3 plus 2 plus the remaining 1s, which were 3. You could have done this a different way. You could have tried to make a 10 and added the remaining add-ins. Whatever you did, if you got the same perimeter, then any way that's efficient for you works. So let's determine the perimeter. So I know 4 plus 3, what does that equal, third graders? 7, plus 2 more is 9. Well, 9 plus 3, 9 needs 1 to become a 10, and there'd be 2 left. So I know that it must be what? You're right, it's 12. Let's check by counting each of our side lengths. You can always check by counting the numbers. So here's 4. I'm going to put a dot here because this is where I started. So 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So if the units are provided, always check by carefully counting the total distance around the shape and use that to check your equation. Fantastic. Okay, so for this one, we have a regular hexagon. A hexagon is any shape with 6 sides. So I know that if this side length is 2, what would each side length remaining also be? Wonderful! Each would also be 2 because it's a regular hexagon. For regular hexagons, all sides have the same length. Would you please draw this hexagon on your paper? And would you please very carefully label each side length? Third graders, you know since this shape is a hexagon, to determine the perimeter of this hexagon, you have to very carefully add each side length. Since it's a hexagon, you will have 6 add-ins since there are 6 sides. Would you please write your equation? And would you please solve to find the total perimeter or the total distance around this shape? Remember, you think of it as if you cut a corner and stretched it out. What would be the total length of all of the side lengths put together? You may solve this. Pause the video and solve it. You're exactly right. If each side length were 2 inches, the total of all of the side lengths put together is 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12 inches. Gotta put those units. You're completely right. The total perimeter of this hexagon is 12 inches because we very carefully add each side length together to find the total distance of all of the side lengths, which tells us the total perimeter, because perimeter accounts for just the total distance around the edge of a shape. Here is your assignment today, third graders. And the first one I have modeled for you. So you'll begin by watching this video. You can watch it 2 times if you need more support. And then you will carefully determine the total perimeter of these shapes by adding all of the side lengths together or counting the number of units. For this first one, I added 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 to determine that the total distance around this shape was 12. You guys find the perimeters of the remaining shapes by carefully counting or adding the side lengths together. Double check your work before you turn it in today. Thank you for your fantastic work with perimeter. I can't wait to see your assignment.